Colombians are protesting the mere sight of foreigners in cafes. Racist Colombians rioting in the streets, telling gringos to go home. Xenophobic Colombians tell gringos to leave their country. These are some of the headlines that have been doing the rounds on Medellin social media, and they're causing foreigners to reconsider their need to travel to Medellin because they're scared of how the locals might treat them. But by the end of this video, you're really going to know the truth about if you should or should not be worried being a foreigner in Medellin. Let's begin with the event that started it all. On March 28th of this year, a US citizen was found in Gotham Hotel in the Poblado neighborhood of Medellin with two underage girls. And no, it's not one of those cases where they were 17 and maybe they looked older than 18 and he took the chance and he didn't check, poor guy. They were actually 12 and 13, so no excuse for what he did. He originally tried to get into the apartment, but a security guard knocked him back, obviously seeing that the girls were underage. But what he did was he knew exactly when the security guard finished his shift. So later on, very early hours of the morning, he came back when the security guard wasn't there and was able to access the apartment. The only thing that saved these girls was the fact that a neighbor was up at that time and actually saw him entering the apartment, saw that the girls were obviously underage, and they alerted the police. When the police arrived, they caught him in the jacuzzi with the two girls. Not only that, but when they searched his apartment, they found some other very disturbing evidence. They found traces of the party drug called Tusi, and they also found, let's call it, male contraception items. It starts with C, I'm sure you know what it is. They found 5 of those used in the apartment. So this guy was detained by police. They actually had him in custody. They held him for 12 hours, but ultimately they decided to release him, citing a lack of evidence. Think about what I just told you, where he was caught and what else was found in his surroundings. They called that a lack of evidence, so they just let him go. And as soon as he left, what do you think he did? Boom, straight to the airport on the first plane to Florida out of Colombia. The last I heard about this situation, the Colombian government was in talks with the US government to extradite this guy back to Colombia to face charges. But as far as I know, at the point of recording this video, he's still roaming free somewhere. After this event, I'm sure you can understand that the locals were up in arms and extremely disappointed at the way that it had been handled by the government and the police especially. Due to all this backlash, in addition to the fact that this was not the first of this type of case, there had been actually a lot of foreigners caught with underage girls in Medellin, especially in the last few months. The mayor, Fico Gutierrez, he brought in a new rule, or a decree as he called it, and he said that all prostitution is now illegal in public spaces. So the most tourist areas, Parque Lleras, Provenza, Parque Poblado, non-prostitution zones. But the biggest rule that they brought in, which affected a lot of people, was the fact that the bars and clubs in this area also were now required to shut at 1 a.m. And for anyone who's ever been to a bar or club, 1 a.m. is very early. Most people are just getting into the swing of things at that time. So you can imagine how much money the local business owners in that area might have lost because of this new rule. So despite the fact that in general, most of the city and most Colombians were very happy with the fact that Fico was actually taking a stand against this type of behavior, against sex tourism, against exploitation of minors, there was a certain section of people who were very upset with this ruling. And you can imagine who it is, the business owners in these areas. So a few days later, these business owners took to the streets of Medellin to protest this ruling and to let the government know how much they had in fact been impacted negatively. And this is where the first reports of the Gringo hate began. Colombians are protesting the mere presence of foreigners in Medellin cafes. Frightening, said one article. Everyone was up in arms about this, talking about Colombians are racist, they don't want gringos. But what actually happened? Well, let me show you the original viral video. As you can see, the title in this one is Xenophobic Colombians Tell Tourists to Leave Cafe Pergamino. Anyone that saw that who was a foreigner in Medellin was immediately upset and immediately scared. But what if I told you that the title of the video had absolutely nothing to do with what actually happened that day? La Silla Vacía, which is a independent reporting group in Colombia, did an article on this. It's linked in the description if you want to read it. The merchants passed through the streets and told everyone to close their stores so that they could join in the demonstration. In the video, which I'm about to show you, the protesters shout, "Close them, close them." Several protesters also told El Colombiano, which is a huge newspaper here, that the protest was not against the tourists, but against the establishment for not joining the closing day called by Lleras merchants. So to summarize, the protesters were going through the streets in that area, in Provenza, in Parque Lleras, in all those areas that had been affected by this mayor's new ruling of the shutdown at 1 a.m. They were going to all the shops and saying, close down, we need you to join us on this protest. This next video I'm going to show you, you're going to see the crowd outside yelling, close up, and saying afuera, afuera, meaning close up and come outside, meaning join us. So you can see in this video that the staff actually packing up, they're taking all their stuff inside, they're preparing to close up, and that's why it's empty. And back to the original video, let's just check it out again. You can clearly see here that the crowd is yelling afuera, afuera, meaning come outside, come outside. They're telling the workers at the cafe to pack up and come join them on the protest. And you can see immediately that the guy here in the video is actually going up to the patrons of the cafe and telling them, we're going to close, you've got to get out, in which they reply by getting up and getting out of the cafe. You can rewind and watch the video again if you like, but nowhere in both videos do I hear the word gringo, do I hear the word extranjero, which is foreigner. I hear nothing that indicate that this was anything to do with hate against foreigners. Also, something that you need to think about, what was the reason these people were protesting about again? They were protesting because they were losing money because of early closure. Where do they work? They work in Parque Lleras and they work in Provenza, two of the most heavily trafficked tourist areas. Most of the income is coming from foreigners and tourists. Then why would they want tourists to get out of the country? Why would they say gringos go home? This was the first protest that got a lot of attention and had a lot of videos popping up about the gringo hate. Now let's get to the second video. But to understand that, we need to talk about the events that occurred on Women's Day, March 8th. On Women's Day, there was a lot of protests around Medellin and Colombia about the way that the Colombian government and the government of Medellin was treating women. And during these protests, a couple of women decided to graffiti the metro system in Medellin. Within a couple of days, these women's photos were all over the internet for the world to see, and Fico spoke out saying that this type of behavior was unacceptable. Fast forward 3 weeks to the Livingston scandal. They had him in custody with all the evidence there, but they just let him go. And on top of that, there was no immediate penalties or anything said about the Gotham Hotel where all of this occurred. This caused rage across a lot of the feminist groups, saying that, why did you handle the first case and come down with a iron fist, but with the second case, you just let him walk and now you're not doing anything about it? And this is where the second protest begins. I actually received a personal invitation from a friend of mine to attend this protest, which is why I know exactly what it was about. It was to be held in front of the Gotham Hotel to protest the fact that no penalties at all were handed down against this hotel, and also the fact that the government wasn't doing anything to stop the surge of sexual tourism and exploitation of minors. Once again, nothing to do with hate against foreigners. Right now, I'm going to show you a video that was going viral during these protests. It's from an Instagram channel called Cofriada para el Cambio, and it really encapsulates the frustration that the locals are feeling right now in Medellin.
Este trapo que ustedes ven ahí, Fico persiguen feministas y encubre pedófilos, casi que nos es arrebatado por la Subsecretaría de Espacio Público y la policía. Pero cuando llegamos a las discotecas y a los bares, en donde era evidente que había mujeres, jóvenes, menores de edad, se hacían los de la vista gorda. Y en cambio salían puteros extranjeros de esos lugares y hasta trataban mal a la fuerza pública, la maltrataban. Vaya que uno haga eso como colombiano. ¿Qué es lo que está pasando? Medellín no es un burdel. Las mujeres y los movimientos feministas están protestando, se están uniendo y se están organizando para decir, esto no lo vamos a permitir más.
So In this video, you can see how upset the locals are at that Medellin has turned into a brothel of sorts. They really want this cleaned up and they're frustrated that the government is not doing enough about it. But in this video, did you see anything about hate against foreigners? Did you see anyone saying gringos go home? I didn't. Ultimately, for you to understand how you're going to be treated when you get to Medellin, you have to answer the question of what type of tourist are you? As the mayor of Medellin, Fico, recently said in an interview,
El sector turismo es muy importante para Medellín. Anualmente ya están recibiendo 1.400.000 turistas. Esto significa generación de empleo y oportunidades. Dos cosas claras. No queremos ese turista que llega acá por sexo y drogas. No queremos ese turista que viene acá al tema de explotación sexual de niños, niñas y adolescentes.
So I hope that's given you a bit of an understanding and put to rest some of these crazy accusations that some other people on YouTube and other social media are putting out. We've got the facts right here. If you want to read more, check out the articles that I've left in the description of this video.